then you have the money which finances the Nazi Party, and this is coming from Montague Norman vis-a-vis Brown Brothers Harriman. And this is sort of an interesting segue, because Montague Norman was a follower of Blavatsky. And again, why was the Theosophical Society used in this way? I mean, in hindsight, it's fairly obvious. They wanted to camouflage all of this with mysticism. Yeah. Mysticism is a form of just raw irrationality with which they can put these ideas into culture, normalize them, right? It just makes the human mind have a harder time thinking of them as propaganda. So you also have like Aleister Crowley is part of this as well, right? With all of the sex magic and the mysticism that he's promoting. He's coming from exactly the same group of people. And it's and for the same purpose. It's just to lay this mysticism as a way to break down Christian society. I mean, that's honestly what the mysticism is for. It's just a transition point between the ordinary historical Christian society and this kind of state they want to take the culture to, which is easier to control. And it's really that. There's nothing more complicated about it than that. But anyway, so then Montague Norman, he organizes Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers was his family's investment bank that they owned. He was the head of the Bank of England at the time. And he merged it. They wanted to move money toward Hitler, but he wanted it to be harder to understand and trace. And so you created Brown Brothers Harriman. And this is where you get all these ideas about Prescott Bush and the Bush family being Nazis, because Harriman Brothers was completely staffed with Skull and Bones members, Skull and Bones being the Yale Secret Society, which is a part of Freemasonry. And all of these individuals were then taken into Harriman Brothers, who then becomes part of Brown Brothers Harrimans, which then arranged with Schott, this Freemason German banker, to fund the Nazi Party, to develop the German economy, to create the war machine with which the nation committed suicide, apparently, later on. But all of this is coming, again, under the auspice of the Theosophical Society and Blavatsky. And now it's time to produce Hitler. Blavatsky has talked about a world leader, a kind of messianic character. She has a term for it. Hitler is seen as this by these groups which are coming from Blavatsky. I mean, you have Sabbatendorf and Dietrich Eckart, and these are members of this Theosophical Society, which are bringing National Socialism, which has come into Germany through the Bellamy brothers, who are followers of Blavatsky in the 1890s. They bring it in. And so now you get all of these kind of quasi-racial, mystical, but also very kind of structured, militaristic culture things that are, if you look at, kind of the stuff that's being talked about by the precursor to the Nazi Party, they are all just in this weird combination of mysticism, National Socialism, which is racially, identified. And what they're trying to do is in my opinion, they're trying to organize Central Europe for a racial slaughter. They're just bringing them all in there, all of the Aryan individuals, and then giving them an insane leader to set them up for being exterminated. I mean, I know this is hard to swallow, but if you look at how specifically the Theosophical Society was related to all of these disparate events, to the swastika, the National Socialism, the flag salute, the money, and then all the individuals. And then finally you end up with Eckhart, who is really Hitler's handler. I mean, you can easily call him that. He bought him the trench coat, supposedly. He showed him how to talk, how to address crowds. He helps him with all of this. And And when he dies on his deathbed, he says, you know, don't cry for me because I'm the one that really taught Hitler. Hitler's dancing to my tune. I'm the one who showed him. I brought Blavatsky to him, The Secret Doctrine, you know, this book, which is the kind of the precursor of the mysticism of the Nazi Party. Um, and so, you know, then you have this situation wherein Hitler, you know, wages total war, completely irrational idea, total war, and talks about how, you know, if we can't win, we deserve to die as a race. You know, again, there's these bizarre justifications for genocide.
Right.
And of course, he's opposed to Churchill, who's exactly the same philosophy: total war, kill them all, firebomb all the cities,
Hmm.
bring the citizens into the cities where we can get at them better with the fire bombs. So Europe is being exterminated, right? Both by you have Hitler on one side, and on the other you have Churchill. I just happen to have a little kind of a visualization, which you really can't see, unfortunately, but this is a Bolshevik note. I'm not sure what year, but it would have been, you know, like 1930 or something, but it's fairly early. And you can't really see it, but maybe you can actually. It has a swastika that's hidden in the middle and the center of it. Can you see it? Yeah, it's hard to see.
Not quite, but
Yeah, you can. Anyway, it's there.
I'd love to
I
get
can assure you.
a picture of that or a scan, or if you tell me where I can find it, I can.
Well, the heart, you can go online, and they're not that rare, but it has the right angled swastika, and these notes were issued before the Nazi Party. This note was issued in 1917.
Wow.
That's 1917, and the swastika is right here, right there. It's right in the center, and it's actually kind of obscured. It's hard to see. They've made it so you have to kind of
Right.
fiddle with the thing to get the light right, but it is there. The swastika was the premier symbol of what's called operational Freemasonry. Um, you know, like Rudyard Kipling and the Duke of Kent had it as their kind of personal icons. So it's sort of a brand of this Nazi party as being under the control of Freemasonry. I mean, that would be my take. And the incredible thing is that the Quattro Coronati, um, as it was founded, I mean, it had Zionists like what is his name? He was a former London chief of police. He handled the whole Jack the Ripper. I forget his name, but anyway, I mean, Palmerston really began what becomes modern Zionism. I mean, a lot of people think that it's comes out of the rabbinical tradition or something, and I'm sure there was Zionism inside of the world of the rabbis, but there was also what's called Reform Judaism, which was much more popular, and it was actually taking the religion in a different direction completely. But Freemasonry had this idea of a kind of a Zionist and racially separate nation. And so in 1840, Palmerston, who was the premier of England, or Shaftesbury, his father-in-law, one of the two, they started making this position that now is the time for the Jews to return to their homeland.
Right.
And this was an amazing, kind of declaration. I was completely aware of this. I found out about this through Anthony Chaikin. He was one of the LaRouche scholars, and he's just an absolutely brilliant researcher. He and Jeffrey Steinberg, I believe his name is, they're two Jewish scholars who worked for LaRouche, and they had uncovered all of this. And that's how I actually came through their work. Tony Chaikin had done lectures on Palmerston and saying, look, I mean, this is where Zionism come from. This is the Zionism that actually produces the nation. It isn't an abstract religious position. I mean, this is the political force, historical force that creates the state of Israel. And so around 1840, 1850, they started the process. And what they did was, Charles Warren is the name of the individual who was the Freemason and that I was referring to, who was one of the founders of the Quattro Coronati. And what they did is they, through Freemasonry, through the funding of Freemasonry and the British royal family, they set up all this money and they started doing surveys of the Holy Land. And these were the surveys that were then ultimately used to establish the state of Israel with. They kind of got a understand, because they didn't even know where it was really. I mean, they kind of knew where Jerusalem was, but the idea of like how they could set up a nation. So they did all of these archaeologic surveys. They bought the Suez Canal, and then they brought in British soldiers into Syria. And so in other words, they sort of began to have sort of more Masonic control of the region. This was in the 19th, 20th, late part of the 19th century. And so you then transition to Theodore Herzl, who is literally an employee of these people. I mean, he actually, he claims that he sort of, his Zionism, he doesn't really give a good explanation as to where it comes from. I mean, he kind of, I think he gives a position, well, it's just sort of like Jewish, patriotism and racial pride, these things. But actually, he had come from this group. He had as his nickname during college years was Tancred, which is a character of Disraeli, who was one of the Masonic circle in Britain. So you can see that he was absolutely already, when he didn't have a midlife, like epiphany and then transition. He was doing this from the very beginning of his life, and even his speeches were coming through Disraeli. So he was sort of an artificial character, but he was very instrumental to try to, 1870, 1880, to get Zionism going. And they were opposed, and again, this has sort of been swept away from history, by Reform Judaism, which had taken the position that, as opposed to Zionism, and they were saying that they wanted to transition Judaism into a religion that would just be a light for all humanity. And they were actually writing this. It was actually part of the religion, was the idea that we would take Judaism to everyone, and it would just be for everyone. It wouldn't be a xenophobic, racially divisive, religiously divisive religion. That they would transition from that into a much broader spiritual and intellectual position, and that movement then had to actually be attacked and swept aside by the British Masonic organizers. They had to hire people to go to the different synagogues and proselytize for Zionism, because the British Freemason position that now is the time for the Jews to return just made no sense to the European Jews. I mean, there was Tony Chaikin made this. He said this was news to the Jews that this was the time for us to return. But anyway, then you have the catastrophic events of World War II, and from which the nation of Israel is created. And I would just suggest that this would be a really good area for a full-blooded historical investigation as to how these two entities really came into existence, how the political force of Zionism to found this nation of Israel, and the Masonic influence in back of the Nazi Party, because the really horrible possibility that comes out of the analysis is that Europe was set up as a chessboard and basically maneuvered into this situation where, you have the destruction of the Gentiles on one side and the foundation of Israel on the other, because with the Holocaust, you were able to get a lot of immigration to Israel that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and also you had a justification, a political justification to to genocide the Palestinians, basically. So this would be, the analysis and the points I brought out would just be a great starting place for real scholarship. I've tried to encourage others, to go into this. I lay out these facts in my next books, but obviously, just I don't have enough time and energy to do all of this work. And I'm hoping that more people will start to pick up the idea of the Quattro Coronati's role in both the foundation of Israel and the creation of the Nazi Party, because both of those phenomena are very much beholden to the British Freemason lodges, and yet this isn't something that we don't get this history, and we have to dig through all of these research materials to find any of this stuff. So I'm sorry to be long-winded about this,
No,
but I
this is
think it is
wonderful.
important, to get these ideas out, and to encourage academics and scholars and independent internet people. It's it's a very difficult kind of subject to go into. It's hard to go into it without creating, because first of all, you have the charge of anti-Semitism is hurled almost immediately at people wanting to talk about this in a objective way. But beyond that, there are a lot of like far right, alt-right people who they take the position that that Hitler was good. They're like this kind of fringe kind of political, and they are very opposed to these ideas. So you get to a position where you kind of piss everybody off, but that just shows you're on maybe the right track, because this stuff has been hidden, and the kind of the broad outline that I presented, and I think there isn't enough, and I don't have enough like research power to really be conclusive about this. But man, it sure looks suspicious to me, and I would sure like to see this as an area of research taken up by schools, by institutions. This is, there's all of these New Testament scholars. There's all of these kind of historical departments, in universities. What the heck are they doing?
Right.
Nothing. They're just regurgitating ideas which are, now that the independent media is coming into existence, are really being exposed as not as solid as we were led to believe. And so this is an area I hope that others will take it up and try to follow Blavatsky and that strand of mysticism into the creation of Hitler, and also the British Freemasonry, the Quattro Coronati group, into the what becomes the political force to create Israel, because those two strands, in my opinion, are the ones that really need to be understood.